And welcome everyone to an NCAA.com March Madness Championship Week Skype session. I'm Andy Katz. Pleased to be joined by Bernard Muir, the chair of the Men's Basketball Selection Committee, also in his day job as the athletic director at Stanford. He'll resume those duties here shortly. All right, Bernard, yesterday when we talked over the status of the bracket. There were 28 teams that were in that large pool. You had 12 AQs. So we're roughly about 34 candidates for those remaining 8 at large at that juncture. Where do we stand right now with the status of the bracket and the field?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time discussing teams yesterday. So there's not going to be significant movement. We now have 32 teams in the field. We still have about 30 teams under consideration. We are going to this morning narrow that list. We think after yesterday's games and looking at, obviously, the whole season for some of the resumes for these teams, we think we can narrow that 30 down to a much smaller number. So we've made some progress. I expect us to seed a couple more lines. We've already gotten through 4 lines. So we added another line yesterday, and we'll see where we take it from there.
So yesterday when we talked, you had seeded the first 3 lines, but nothing is written in stone yet. And now you said you're down to the 4th. Was there any movement with those first 3 lines based on what occurred on Thursday?
Yeah, great question. So we didn't go through the scrubbing process. We probably will do a first scrub today. So I expect some changes. We'll probably talk about some scenarios that could continue to play out throughout the course of this week. But we have not changed the first 3 lines yet because we haven't gone into full scrubbing yet.
So we discussed sort of injured players coming back. 2 major ones occurred on Thursday. Zion Williamson for Duke didn't miss a shot. Caleb Weston for Ohio State. They beat Indiana. I know you guys were watching those 2 games and those 2 players coming back. What kind of effect would that or could that have on Duke at the top of the bracket potentially and Ohio State toward the back, having impact players like that back on the court?
Well, that's what we used today to have the opportunity to discuss scenarios like that. Both of them certainly had a significant impact for the teams. They looked like they were in full form. You know, sometimes you worry about whether they can be back at 100%. It's clear in both of their cases that they were playing at a high level again. And so we'll spend some time talking about that and where do we see both of those teams as it relates to selection and seeding. So we expect to have a number of conversations about that and also look at some other programs as well, too, to see where they are with their player availability.
Yeah, Nick Ward's supposed to be coming back from Michigan State later today on Friday. You know, with a team that is not necessarily safely in, I'm just curious from the committee's perspective, and a player's been out, whether it's injury, suspension, and then he comes back in the conference tournament, how much are you looking to see, you know, how well that team is playing with that player again and whether or not they look as well as they did maybe when he was playing before?
We're certainly looking at that. At the same token, results matter, and so results while the player was in and also results when they were gone. And then results when they come back all factor in. And so we'll have to have a really meaningful discussion on programs that are going through that scenario and see exactly where the team is at now and how do we project where they'll be in the future, especially when we're comparing it to other teams that are under consideration or if in terms of they're already in the tournament, where should we seed them? So a lot of discussion needs to occur when you're talking about player availability.
All right, Bernard, how is the committee dealing with or differentiating, I would say, teams that have a high number of losses but a great strength of schedule versus low number of losses but a high strength of schedule? You know, sort of that balance.
Yeah, so that was a part of our conversation yesterday when looking at some of these resumes. You know, at the end of the day, we want to see, can a team compete at a high level, especially on the road and on a neutral floor, since this tournament is going to be played on a neutral floor. And we want to take into consideration what do they achieve. And we understand that especially during conference play, you might have a loss or 2 or maybe a few more. But we want to see, did you play a good schedule? Did you test yourself? And how'd you do? And so there's a lot of discussion. No team looks exactly alike. And so we really have to delve into who they play and how they do and the caliber of the competition.
How has the net affected the process versus when you guys had the RPI?
We love this new metric. It's certainly contemporary in nature. Love looking, especially I think it's going to be helpful to us in seeding and the predictive measures that are incorporated into the metric. I think each time we get a game, every day that we look at the new team sheet, it's really helpful, and especially when you're trying to compare teams. I think this new metric is just a little more handy, user-friendly for us, and we love the way it's trending.
So we discussed, obviously, when a player returns, but the conference tournaments, especially a team that's competing for one of those top 4 lines. For example, Texas Tech lost early in the Big 12. How much do you value the conference tournament results, especially for a seeding issue?
Well, I mean, certainly we're looking at, you've heard me say this before, you've heard other chairs say this previously, the full body of work. And so we don't get just asphyxiated on what happens in these last few days here or what's going to happen the next couple of days. Does it matter? Yes, but I would also say what happened in November, January, February matters as well too. And so we're trying to assess that and not get too caught up in just the last game we saw. And so that's really important for us to have discussions about that, saying just don't get fixated what happened last night, what's going to happen today or tomorrow. We might have to do some scenario planning, like if somebody gets to the championship and who wins, that happens in a given year. But we're really trying to assess the full schedule to see where a team should fall.
We've got some potential bid stealers in various conferences that are still alive here on Friday morning. West Virginia in the Big 12. There are teams alive in the Mountain West and the Pac-12. Nebraska in the Big 10. At what point does the committee start looking at contingency plans as these teams advance possibly into the semis and maybe even to the finals?
I think that's the discussion we start today. Certainly tomorrow will be more of the same. And then we'll start lining up teams saying if this happens, then this team is going to be left out and this team goes into the field. So we'll start doing, I would say today, tomorrow, we'll really get into that commentary as to, okay, what should happen? How do we line up the teams as to who will go into the field?
All right, before I let you go, Bernard, let's just do a quick numbers thing. At this juncture, how many teams are in the field right now?
Right now, there's 32 into the field.
And how many teams are remaining? Oh, go ahead.
Let me just clarify something. There's 32 in the field. Know that some of those teams could become AQs.
Right.
We'll still have to assess really how many truly do we have to go add to the field, because there's some that are still in play and they could end up becoming the AQ, which would open up some spots for some others.
And then how many teams are still under consideration?
30 under consideration, but like I said this morning, we'll probably eliminate, I would say, 5 to 10 schools and narrow that list down.
Appreciate it, Bernard. A lot of basketball coming on Friday.
Thank you very much. We're looking forward to watching.